So you toast the foot, get it nice red ember. Chris and I have had this conversation quite often where I'll put this cigar up against any Cuban, and I've had quite a few, but this will stand right against them without a problem.
Oh yeah. A reproducible cigar flavor. It's highly scientific. It's kind of like Brian with his beef. My gosh, this is fabulous beef. Melt in your mouth. He does all the genetic testing on his beef to get that exact taste and marbling of his beef. Well, it's the same thing with cigars. With cigar tobacco. It doesn't get much better. Not too long ago, Brian came out with his beef jerky line, and he brought some to the club for all of us cigar smokers up there to try out, and it was probably the best beef jerky I've ever had.
We made a trip down there
just to get
3 months ago just to get some beef jerky. So this is a 55 Ford truck body. That sits on top of an 02 Ford Explorer. It includes the interior. That's the interior out of the 02. This is the intake for the heat and air conditioning on the Explorer. So I had to put a vent to coincide with that. On the Ford, the vent is up here. So what is that? Cheese grater.
Cheese grater? No.
According to my wife, it was her best one. I had to put the Explorer in there somehow. So that's what the -E means. I met Brian when he visited our cigar club called the Fool's End up in Missoula. Liked these cigars a lot, breathe great, they're good taste, and they stay lit no matter what you do with them. Between the mix, and Brian has several cigars with the same
filler.
The same filler.
The filler's all the same, but he's got different wrappers on his cigars, which gives them a distinct different flavor.
They draw so well that they just stay lit. It's a pleasure to smoke.
They smoke even all the way through. They don't get hot. A lot of cigars, once you get halfway through or 2/3 through, they'll start getting hot. Hot to smoke, hot to the taste, and it changes the flavor, so you don't end up enjoying the whole cigar. I end up tossing it off.
You don't inhale it. You taste it in your mouth. Because of the sparse population here, you don't expect someone to manufacture, especially this grade of cigar. For me, the mark of a good cigar is the binder, which holds the filler together, and then it's pressed, and then the wrapper is put on later, and then it's aged, and then you buy them. The mark of a good cigar for me is that the binder and the wrapper hold it together and don't explode. If you read Cigar Aficionado magazines like that, there are fellows in there who will tell you that the wrapper is 50% of the taste of the cigar. I personally don't believe that, especially when you smoke Brian cigars. They've got the same filler, the same binders with different wrappers on them, and there's a small difference between the way they taste. There's no difference in the way they smoke, but it's not 50% of the taste.
No.
My friends and I, once we found out that Brian is in Dillon, which is not too far from us, in Montana speak, we decided to go down and visit him, and we've been down there 4 or 5 times a year ever since. You really feel like you've been someplace when you visit his place down there.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
I'm a big fan of the Bull cigars because they're not too long. It's a good short duration cigars. It smokes in about a half an hour, and it's one of my favorite go-to cigars.
I'll always have them in my humidor.
Since I'm retired now, I've taken up smoking cigars on a regular basis. So I've been a certified welder ever since I turned 18 and was old enough to get my welding certs. Eventually got tired of that and wanted to do something a little more exotic, so I enrolled in commercial diving school to become an underwater welder. Very few people across the planet actually break into that field. It's really hard to get into. But they don't tell you that when they're advertising for commercial diving school. Oh yeah, you can be a commercial diver and you can make all this money and go to all these exotic places, but it's very hard to break into that field. I stayed in Seattle and opened up a small diving company with 2 of the guys I went to dive school with. And it wasn't too long after that, I met David, and I don't remember exactly where it was that we met at.
I was working on the sub, and you They hired you guys to do the diving on the first
Right, we got, my little diving company got hired to find the airplane and for a group called Air Marine Salvers.
So you see that mud line right there? Because of the engine weight, it was sticking nose down in the mud. And it was up to mud to that line, as you can see across the plane.
So we had to jet the mud away from the airplane before we could pull it out.
Right.
Well, Lake Washington's got quite a few World War II aircraft in it, because right in the middle of Lake Washington on the west side of the lake is Sandpoint Naval Air Station.
Okay.
And they did a lot of training for World War II. Consequently, the plane that we pulled out of the water was involved in a slight mid-air collision with another plane. They were doing formation flying, and this plane here tipped the wing of another plane, and that plane went in the water right away and broke up when it went in. This one here, the pilot tried to limp it back to shore and didn't quite make it, so he bellied it in, and the plane sat in 157 feet of water for, what was it, 32 years?
37 years.
Yeah, 37 years before we pulled it out.
That was, we lifted it with a lift bag from underwater.
I assume the pilots survived.
There are no bodies in Lake Washington. For the military, if an airplane sinks and it's got bodies on it, it's a crypt, which I agree with. You don't touch them. It's a grave. But there were no bodies on anything in Lake Washington. That's that plane sitting in the Museum of Flight
In Seattle. As far as Brian's beef goes, I grew up in Oregon, and before I moved out here, I had a place in Bend, and I would buy my beef from a company called Borland Cattle Company. It was very good quality beef, all open range, pasture fed, so on and so forth, no hormones, no antibiotics, none of that kind of stuff in there. And that was pretty good beef. Once I moved out of Oregon, Brian had an event at the Full Zen Cigar Club where he brings in whatever kind of cut of steak, and we cook them up there at the club and serve them to the members. And that was the first time I tried his beef, and it's like, my gosh, this is fabulous beef, melt in your mouth. So I've been to that event for the last 3 years, and the next one's coming up this year in December. And since I like Brian's beef so much, I said, okay, well, how do I get my hands on some of your beef? And he says, well, we're just started a web page to where you can get it. Up until that point, year before last, David and I split a half a cow, and
No, we split a whole cow.
that was this year. We split a whole cow this year. It was a half
Oh,
a
that's
cow.
right, that's right.
Half a
You're
cow
right,
the first
you're
time.
right.
Great. Everybody in the family loves it. Oh, where do you get that beef from? I said, well, I get it from a rancher down in Dillon. And by the way, he makes good cigars, and his wife makes a really good vodka. So it's kind of the full package deal. You go to Brian's ranch down there in Dillon, and you can get bottles of gorgeous vodka. You can get excellent premium cigars, and you get some of the best beef on the planet. It's kind of hard to go wrong. I just ordered my half of beef, a month and a half ago, from Brian, and I can get it in 20-pound boxes. One of my daughters lives with me, and my granddaughter lives with me. So there's 2.5 of us, and we can't eat a half of beef inside of 2 years if we try. So Brian sells it to me. You can buy it you can buy the whole half of beef at one time or whole cow at one time if you have room to store it, or you can get 10-pound boxes, 20-pound boxes, 40-pound boxes. Order it as you need it.
I don't know if I can explain this properly, but you don't get the front half or the back half. You get a half of the half. The way he puts it together is excellence.
A little bit of everything. Like, I've never cooked skirt steak before, so I got on my computer, looked up skirt steak recipes. That's not something that you see in the grocery store. Different types of roasts, New York steaks, sirloin steaks, ribeye steaks,
Ribeyes, those are
bone-in ribeyes. It doesn't get much better. Not too long ago, Brian came out with his beef jerky line, and he brought some to the club for all of us cigar smokers up there to try out, and it was probably the best beef jerky I've ever had.
We made a trip down there
just to get
3 months ago just to get some beef jerky.
Most jerky you get is over seasoned. They put too many flavors and stuff on it, so all you taste is the flavor. You don't get to taste beef. Where Brian's is lightly seasoned, and you can have the full flavor of the beef with whatever your favorite seasoning is, where the seasoning isn't overpowering.
I've met very, very few cigar smokers I didn't like. Through all walks of life. You walk in, we just took a cross-country trip And all across the country, we were looking for cigar bars to go and enjoy a good cigar when we stopped in the evening, sometimes at lunch. And we could count on the same attitude and the same basic group of people wherever we went. And we traveled from the East Coast to Montana and had that experience all the way across the country.
A good cigar always brings out good conversation. No matter what your politics are or who you're with, a good cigar, everybody can appreciate a good cigar. If you're on the right or if you're on the left, it doesn't matter. A good cigar is a good cigar.
However, politics do not go with cigars. Remember that. This one is a 32 Ford Roadster. Something I've always wanted to build. And it's not quite exactly stock either. It's got an LS1 engine in it. Way too strong for the car. I mean, the car weighs about 1,900 pounds and there's 470 horse in that engine. So it's a little overpowered.